All right. Welcome into today. These headsets on. And gonna have to reconnect my Bluetooth as well. Give me a second here. Just canceling off. All right. Really got to get me a separate headset. One for the gym, one for the office, so I don't have to keep switching them back and forth like that. All right. Actually got a few minutes to do some streaming today. Wanted to look into something I was reading earlier that kind of caught my attention that could just be nothing. It could be that I just don't understand unemployment and how it's reported and the point that people are trying to convey, but it seemed really weird to me the way that media coverage was handling the new unemployment claims number that was coming in. So let's see here. I believe I saw this on News. See if it's still here. Might also look at some other news today if we get through this, but I'm going to check this out first. Where is it? Must not be important. Or an old news cycle, I suppose. Okay. This is what I was talking about. U.S. unemployment claims dipped to 245,000 last week, hovering at historically low levels. U.S. jobless claims ticked down to 245,000. The number of Americans collecting unemployment benefits from the week of June 7th slid to 1.95 million. President Trump's aggressive and often erratic trade policies, including 10% taxes on imports from almost every country, are weighing on the U.S. economy. So when I first read this, not much hit me because it's just kind of a boring headliner of like, oh, unemployment claims, they dipped a little bit and hovering at historically low levels. I think that's kind of something that we more or less have intuitively understood, is that unemployment is more or less low, and at least has been for the last little bit. But for whatever reason, I decided to look into this a little bit and check out where they're getting the numbers from. And that's where I found something interesting here. So U.S. unemployment, if I could ever spell. There was recently a report came out from, or no, it's not just unemployment, it's unemployment claims. Excuse me. The Department of Labor, that's who it was. They came out with a report like 4 days ago, I think it was, a news release of unemployment insurance weekly claims. And they have a little bit more information than just it dropped to 245,000 and is at historically low levels. So it looks like what they reported was that in the week of June, seasonally adjusted initial claims was 245,000, as is reported. A decrease of 5,000 from the previous week's revised level. The previous week's level was revised up from 2,000 from 248,000 to 250,000. The 4-week moving average was 245,000, an increase of 4,750 from the previous week's revised average. This is the highest level for this average since August 19, 2023, when it was 246,000. The previous week's average was revised up by 500 from 200, blah, 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 blah. That all to me didn't really strike me in any sort of weird way. I thought, oh, okay, yeah, this seems pretty normal. 245,000, a decrease of 5,000 from last week. Yeah, it's just them reporting numbers, right? Nothing that sticks out too much. However, when I started looking at the graphs that they have, you notice anything about them? Moving averages, while there is some variance there and some up and down, they kind of seem pretty flat, don't they? I don't see a lot of up, a lot of down, at least in the last year that they're reporting, whether it's initial claims or insured unemployment. Let's take a look here further down. They also have the unadjusted data, which does have more variance in it because it's not seasonally adjusted, but even so, I don't see 5,000 as being a pretty massive drop, or I also don't see it. So the thing that really started to strike me with this was the claim that the news seems to be pushing, that it's the hovering at historically low levels. And what do they mean by that exactly? Because I don't see a dip here. I see flat lines for the last year. And that's not to say that, this isn't low. Maybe what they mean is, like for the last few years, it's been low and it's just staying that way. I don't know why they would want to report that. Like, let's say unemployment claims have been low for the last 5 to 10 years and we just are on this long streak of unemployment claims being low. Why would they care to report it now that, all of a sudden the Department of Labor comes out with these statistics showing we're at 245,000 and it's at an all-time low? And like, what's the point of saying that? There must be some reason behind it because the graphics don't seem to support it. So the first thing I want to do is verify, like look at longer term data than just the last year. Do they have that here? Unemployment, regular state programs, initial claims, prior year. Yeah, they do have the prior year, but I want a little further than that if I can. Anything I can do past COVID, actually, because COVID is going to probably muddy the waters quite a bit here. Looks like it just goes to 2024, I think. Okay, so let's see if we can find it yearly. Claims by year. Let's see here. Is this a different news release? No, that's the same one. Claims, the St. Louis Fed, initial job claims. What is this? Can I go back to 5 years? Okay. So this is from Trading Economics. Initial jobless claims in the U.S. inched lower by 5,000 from the previous week to 245,000 on the period ending in June 14th, in line with market expectations, but holding the recent upswing to mark the 5th highest reading since August 2023. Okay, interesting. So this is what I was wondering if like what the data set looks like for the last 3 to 4 years, because it's, as I suspected, it's pretty flatlined. I don't see a lot of change. There's definitely some variance, right? Some ups and downs. There's going to be people passing away and no longer applying for jobless claims, and then there's going to be some new people entering the entering jobless claims for a couple of months as they find something new. But I don't see a trend one way or the other until we get past 2022, which of course, this is more COVID era time. So we would expect to see more unemployment claims at that time. So that all goes in line, and it looks like I can't see max unless I can't go back more than 5 years unless I want to pay for it. So let me see if I can find this from somewhere else. But again, it just seems really strange to me that they would want to hone in now, like the media would want to hone in now on the jobless claims report. Like the numbers behind it are accurate and they're correct and they're true, but the reporting seems to, it's like they want you to feel like something recently has caused this, like, oh, look at this, like it's so great how low the unemployment claims are right now. Like, sure, but they've kind of been that way for the last 3, almost 4 years. What's your point? What's your point, Steve? So let me look a little bit more at what they actually said in their articles, because I would think that right now the current administration has a there is a benefit for them to report that the unemployment is at historically low levels, making it seem like, despite all these, tariff policies and all the stuff that's being pushed through the government, like unemployment's still holding pretty low and things haven't gone crazy just yet. Then you would suspect that on the left, the reporting would be, they would try to, I guess, limit that conversation, or at the very least, just not talk about it, right? Like, this is the same old. Why do we even care to talk about this? So let's see, what's the bias comparison look like on this? So left-leaning outlets emphasize the dip in unemployment claims as evidence of economic strength under current policies. using positively charged phrases like historically low and framing Trump's trade policies as aggressive and often erratic, paralyzing businesses and fueling consumer anxiety. In contrast, right-leaning coverage, while acknowledging similar job numbers, adopts a more cautious, pragmatic tone, describing firms as hoarding workers amid uncertainty and warning that tariffs may rekindle inflation without overtly condemning them. This rhetorical divergence highlights a key partisan fault line, the interpretation of tariffs and their economic impact. Both sides agree on the basic employment data, reflecting shared recognition of labor market stability despite differing ideological lenses. Okay, I'm going to need to read more of these articles here because even this strikes me as a little bit strange that it seems almost as if like the left is trying to convey, yeah, things are looking pretty positive right now and the economy is looking pretty strong. Things are pretty good. And on the right, they acknowledge that, yeah, things are pretty strong, but, you know, watch out for those tariffs, at least from what I'm reading here, which I think is backwards from what I would expect. So let's look at a right-leaning, I guess, Financial Post here. This sounds like it wasn't done out of somebody's backyard. Americans applying for unemployment benefits dipped to 245. U.S. jobless claims ticked down. 4-week average of claims, which smooths out week-to-week volatility, rose to 245. The number of Americans collecting unemployment benefits the week of June slid to 1.95 million. What does the title say? U.S. unemployment ticked down, hovering at historically low levels. Yeah, that's just that. That's a choice for them to include hovering at historically low levels in the title. U.S. unemployment ticked down, like that's true. That's what's happening. Hovering historically low levels. It has been hovering at historically low levels for the last 3 or 4 years. It's a choice to add that into the title now. So why would they want to say that? Let's see. Proxy for layoffs. Healthy band. In recent weeks, however, claims have stayed at the high end of range, adding to evidence that U.S. job market is decelerating after years of strong hiring. So far this year, employers are adding a decent but far from spectacular 124,000 jobs a month, down from an average 168,000 last year and an average of nearly 400,000 from 2021 to 2023. The hiring slowdown is partly the drawn-out result of 11 interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve in 2022 and 2023. But Trump's aggressive and often erratic trade policies, including 10% taxes on imports from almost every country on earth, are also weighing on the economy, paralyzing businesses and worrying consumers who fear they'll mean higher prices. I somewhat disagree with that take. I think that, yeah, a hiring slowdown would definitely be coincided with interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve. I find it a little strange that they put those first. I would think that right now, most of the economy, but somewhat depending on the sector, is much more worried about the trade policies going forward and the tariffs. I think that that has a much bigger effect on business decisions going forward than the interest rate hikes have that ended in 2023, by the way, like 2 years ago, basically, and have been stable since then and have possibly been talking about maybe lowering them. Like I don't know that they will, but in any case, to put that as your primary and first reasoning of why the economy slowdown is happening, I find that a little bit strange, maybe even misleading. I would think it's mostly the tariffs. Let's see, paralyzing businesses and worrying consumers. Yep, that's what I would think. Worried. Claims remained elevated. We believe firms have been hoarding workers to ensure they don't lay off skilled and trained workers by mistake, especially with the labor market still very close to full employment. With uncertainty still high, companies have remained hesitant about layoffs. That may be changing. The Fed satisfied that an inflation was coming down, cut rates 3 times last year, but the central bank has turned cautious in 2025, word that Trump's tariffs will rekindle times last year. Am I misremembering that? Wasn't that 2023 that the Federal Reserve cuts ended? I can't type when people are watching me. That's how it works. Let's see. Interest rate steady at its June meeting. That's fine. Yeah, when did they stop, though? Let's Let's look at the Fed Watch tool. That'll tell me what the rates have been and when they changed. Yeah, historical data here. Let's see. I guess that's, no, I want the actual rates. I don't want the probabilities. Okay, hang on. Let's look at it over time. Yeah, look, Fred here. There we go. All right, hiking, and then remain steady. Yeah, September 2023, and even lowered them a little bit. Just April. So that just seems... Where was that article? Why did they say last year? Where was that? The Fed satisfied that inflation was coming down, cut rates 3 times last year, but the central bank has turned cautious in 2025. Oh, okay, sorry, I misread that. They cut rates 3 times last year. Not that they rose them. Okay. That is expected to leave rates unchanged by wrap-ups. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just find this interesting because it's not really incorrect and it's not really an outright lie. It just is interesting to me that they've chosen now to have that as a headline. So let's look at the left side here. Jobless claims stabilized near highest levels this year. Can we also, where was the document here? Stabilize at highest levels this year. I would definitely say they're more or less stabilized, highest levels this year. Let's see. Seems like last week, well, even then, October of last year was higher. When they say this year, they mean year to date. They're so annoying with their words, but let's see here. Okay, well, this is Associated Press, and they also use the same terminology. Yeah, Associated Press use the same terminology. But they even have the same. They even have the same dang picture. Oh, it's because it's a repost. That's why. Okay, then that's not going to tell us anything. But does the article say the same thing? That's interesting. I didn't realize that this happens. Apparently, a left-leaning news organization had a post, and it was reposted on a right-leaning organization. So what's changed between the two of them? The title did not. Tick down, hovering at historically low levels. Tick down, hovering... Yeah, same title. If it's a repost, I assume they didn't change anything. Yeah, it looks the same, looks the same. Yeah, it looks the same. Carl Weinberg. Yeah, so it is just a copy-paste. Interesting. Okay. 15 on the left. So, let's see. Now, does this mean that these are all reposts? Oh, interesting. I didn't know that this was a thing that could happen in ground news, that they would regard each of these as an individual posting, even though they're just reposts. Almost like you can weigh the bias. Okay, well, it looks like it all started with the Associated Press, and the only organization that has used a little bit different language is Bloomberg, which was reposted by NDTV Profit. Who cares? What does Bloomberg say? Jobless claims stabilize near highest levels this year. I do not want to... Nope, can't read it. Okay. All right, well, not going to read it. Applications for U.S. unemployment benefits ticked down last week, stabilizing near the highest levels in 8 months. Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like, at least from reading the title and the description there, they were just giving a basic reporting of it. The basic truths of, yeah, they ticked down and they've stabilized near highest levels. That sounds more accurate than what the other one was saying with at highest levels. Near highest levels in 8 months. Yeah, and that even that's more accurate than this year, because that lets you know they don't need to differentiate between year to date and this year. It's spelled out there. So, okay. What else can I take a look at here? This is just one thing that's kind of bugged me about using ground news is reading something like this and then wondering about like, well, what's the factuality about this? What's the honesty? The factuality is still, very high. And what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that technically what they're saying is correct? That, yeah, it dipped to 245,000, it dropped 5,000 from what was expected. And technically, yes, we're hovering at historically low levels. But as I'm reading this, that just seems, I don't know that I want to call it dishonest per se, but it's certainly, it's so weird to me that they would call this out right now. Out of the last 3 to 5 years that we've had, just that we've been hovering at historically low unemployment levels. Let's see. And then as far as center-leaning articles, what these guys say, hovering at, is this just a repost of the others? Hovering at historically low levels. Hovering at historically low levels. Remaining at historic lows. That feels more honest, like transparent to me than hovering at historically low. Like remaining makes it sound like, oh, like they've been low and they're still low. At least, for the last little while. Hovering historically low, remaining low. And it's just interesting that they all come out with the same spin, more or less, all at the same time. And so many of them copy each other and repost. Okay. Well, just find that really interesting. So remember, when reading that, looks like it's technically correct. Unemployment claims, at least so far, are historically low. Moving average has been basically stable for the last, well, this shows last year, but it looked like as we checked back about 3 years. We'll have to keep our eyes on it and see if anything changes over the next coming weeks due to changes in, tariff policy or maybe global stability. See what happens out of this Iran nuclear conflict. But do remember that it looks like, yeah, unemployment seems to be holding pretty low. Let's see what else is on ground news today. Anything else? FDA approves Gilead's twice-yearly injection for HIV prevention. Prevention. Fed holds key rate steady. The Supreme Court allows state bans on gender transition care for minors. Trump candidate is arrested. Former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, who resigned in protest, launches run for Congress. Interstar. Texas Instruments to invest more than $60 billion to make semiconductors in the U.S. That could be nice. Texas stopped providing new funding for border wall. Why is that? Stopped allocating new funds for the border wall construction. Change follows the approval of a $3.4 billion border security budget that reallocates resources to Operation Lone Star and law enforcement agencies initiated by Governor Abbott in March of 2021. Operation Lone Star involves a collaborative effort between state military forces and law enforcement agencies to detain undocumented immigrants. Governor Abbott asserts that Operation Lone Star prevented over 140,000 unauthorized border crossings and resulted in upwards of 50,000 arrests, while opponents argue that the border wall has not achieved its intended goals and has caused environmental damage. The state will sustain limited border barrier work with $2.5 billion from prior funds, but its focus now emphasizes enforcement and federal partnership rather than further wall construction. Oh, okay. So they're just shifting their focus from building a wall to federal enforcement and support. As if a wall doesn't matter to them. Interesting. Quietly defunds. Just find that interesting. Wasn't that a major talking point in the past that the problem is we just don't have a wall, that there are open areas, open spaces for people to just cross over and they're being let over? And if that's the case, it seems that the legislature of Texas doesn't agree. Zero migrants released in May. As border crossings fall, 93%. Trump administration blocked from cutting local health funding for 4 municipalities. Judge to hear arguments on delay request. Deadly listeria outbreak linked to chicken Alfredo fettuccine sold at Kroger. Oops. Prosecutors ask for new execution date for Texas man in shaken baby syndrome. Alex Jones accused of trying to shield assets as Sandy Hook family seek payments. Oh boy. IDF staff sergeant killed. Australian writer deported by U.S. over pro-Palestinian blog posts. Kneecaps. Social Security Medicare to run short of funds in 2033, trustees say. I wanted to look into this too. I saw that this morning as well and wondered what this means. Medicare Part A's Hospital Insurance Trust Fund is projected to run out by 2033, and starting in 2034, Social Security trust funds are expected to cover only a portion of scheduled benefits without legislative action. The earlier expected depletion is due to increasing medical expenses combined with recent laws that enhance benefits. For 2.8 million public service employees, Medicare provides coverage for approximately 68 million individuals age 65 and older, or those with serious disabilities, according to the trustees. After the depletion of funds, Medicare will be able to cover only 89% of its planned Part A benefits, and Social Security is projected to pay approximately 81% of benefits beyond 2033. Nancy Allman emphasized that the program faces a choice between increasing its funding or cutting benefits. Let's see. So what is the thing that's running out? A trust fund? Okay. Trust fund. My understanding is that these are trust funds that were created by the U.S. government some years ago to help supplement the Medicare and what would the other one be? Retirement funds. But they weren't big enough to be run into perpetuity. They would just be able to run until their funds run out. And it sounds like they are projected to in 2033. So we'll have to see. How is Medicare funded? So trust funds is paid for through 2 trust funds accounts held by the U.S. Treasury. These funds can only be used for Medicare, hospital insurance, supplementary medical insurance. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, how is it financed? Medicare Trust Funds comprises 2 separate funds. The Hospital Insurance Trust Fund is financed mainly through payroll taxes on earnings and income taxes. Okay, yeah, that's the income tax that you pay to Medicare every year on your taxes, and income taxes on Social Security benefits. The Supplemental Medical Insurance Trust Fund is financed by general revenues and the premiums enrollees pay. Taken together, total Medicare costs have risen, blah, blah, blah. Under an illustrative alternative estimated by the CMS actuaries, those costs might rise to 8% of GDP by 2040. They are financed by a complex web of 15 different streams, including several forms of general revenue transfers. Let's see. Hospital Insurance Trust Fund, also known as Part A of Medicare, finances healthcare services related to hospital stays, skilled nursing facilities, and hospices for eligible beneficiaries, mainly Social Security recipients over age 65 or receiving Social Security disability insurance. HI Trust Fund had a revenue of $387 billion and a balance of $178 billion at the end of 2022. The fund's chief revenue sources are payroll taxes, income from the taxation of Social Security benefits, and income from a 3.8% surtax on investment. Interest payments on trust fund balances, premiums from voluntary enrollees ineligible for Medicare coverage based on their earnings records, transfers, etc. Okay. And then the supplemental medical insurance fund finances 2 voluntary Medicare programs, covers physician services and medical supplies. Let's see. Trust fund received $571 billion in income and had $171 billion in assets at the end of 2022. Unlike the HI fund, no payroll taxes are dedicated to SMI. Instead, almost all the fund's income comes from contributions from the general fund, receipts from other sources such as individual income taxes, corporate taxes, excise taxes, and borrowing, and premiums from participants. There are separate premiums for Part B and D, and higher sets of premiums within each part for higher income beneficiaries because the bulk of SMI's funding comes from general fund, blah, 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 boring. Okay. Solvency and budget pressures like the old age and survivors insurance and disability insurance trust funds. The HI Trust Fund faces long-term deficits. The SMI fund, primarily financed by general revenue, does not face these trust fund imbalances, though it still adds substantial growing pressure to the overall budget, while the number of Medicare beneficiaries increased by around 2% annually from 2023 to 2032. Decline in birth rate starting about 65, now puts much greater pressure. Meanwhile, the cost of healthcare has increased rapidly through the COVID-19 crisis. Okay. So costs are exploding. Income is more or less remaining stagnant. And the fund will become insolvent by 2033, they're saying. When is that on the chart here? And it's because of a spike in costs? Interesting. Now, thing to note here is it sounds like Medicare might be in trouble in the next few years going forward. I suppose this is something that we've heard before. And it sounds like we've got two ways out of this problem. Either we can work to lower healthcare costs, or we can increase taxes. And current administration doesn't seem very interested in increasing taxes. As a matter of fact, it seems like they are pretty bent on keeping taxes reduced with this new big beautiful bill. And as far as reducing healthcare costs, I've seen like one article where Trump had said something about forcing companies to reduce their cost of medicines, like price controls, but I don't think anything came out of that. I don't think the president has the power to do such a thing. I think that would have to be something that's passed through Congress. I cannot imagine an executive order having the power for, like, think about it. Imagine you're a plumber and you use the free market to determine, like, oh, this is how much I charge for my time, and I have to pass along, cost for parts to my invoices or whatever it might be. And so based on all that, this is what the cost ends up being. And I believe it's fair because of, what I have to pay to get to where I'm at and what I had to do for my, education and whatnot. And then the president just comes in and says, plumbing is too expensive. You have to cut it down to half of what it was before. You simply can't charge that anymore. For one thing, how screwed would you feel? And secondly, why should he be able to do that? He would need a very good reason, and he doesn't have one. And even if he did, why would one person be responsible for doing that? That really should be something like economic policy in the United States should be decided by Congress and not by a single unilateral person. So in any case, interesting. Something to think about going forward when it comes to politics is, what do we do about Medicare? Because this affects a ton of people, not just those on Medicare right now, but those of us that will be on it in the decades to come. And pressures, I think, will only increase as the birth rate drops and more seniors get into Medicare. And I think eventually, if we, keep on this path, things will levy off, at least from a generational perspective. Like there'll be less of the new generation requiring Medicare than the old, but that's a long ways down the road. Long ways down the road. And even then, if we don't rein in the cost of healthcare, it doesn't matter. Let's see. Former Downers, Grove South teacher. Reddit unveils AI-driven ad tools to help brands tap into user discussions. FDA approves once monthly hereditary angioedema drug. Interesting. Florida AG James Uthman held in civil contempt over immigration law order. Former Raiders receiver, etc., etc. RFK Jr.'s new vaccine advisors will vote on flu shots containing mercury. Now, this is interesting. For anybody who doesn't know, RFK Jr. recently canned the entire CDC vaccine advisory panel and replaced them with new members, completely new members. 17 members got canned, and I believe he added in 8, at least last I had heard. His reasoning for doing so was that the originals were biased and corrupted by corporate influence, and these new ones have more skepticism and will be more fair, I guess. But it seems that the people that he's brought in are not just vaccine skeptics. At the very least, one of them was very heavily spreading misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine during COVID-19, and is just way more than a vaccine skeptic, to the point of a disinformation campaignist. And now apparently they're going to be voting on flu shots containing mercury. My understanding was flu shots don't contain mercury anymore. Let's see here. Thimerosal. It's an ethyl mercury-based preservatives. Safeguard against contamination of the vial. Most single presenter's flu shot and the nasal spray flu vaccine do not contain a preservative because they are intended to be used only once. Preservatives are used to protect vaccines packaged in multi-dose vials each time a vaccine. So thimerosal use in vaccines and other medical products has a record of being very safe. Data from many studies show no evidence of harm caused by the low doses of thimerosal in vaccines. Okay. I might be thinking of something a little bit different. I might have been thinking of the history of thimerosal, that they, during the time when there was questions that it might be causing problems in the vaccine, that the FDA decided, like, we're just going to stop as a precautionary element, putting thimerosal in vaccines. But after doing research, I guess they found that it is safe to use mercury. There are no problems with it. Let's see, prevention, season of vaccines, recommended advisory committee. Yeah, I want to find some of this research they're talking about, because if the new panel is going to vote on it, well, they should be pretty well informed about the science behind the matter, shouldn't they? That could be very safe. Well, I wish that they would cite their information here. It is the CDC's website, after all. Is this another? Okay, thimerosal removal. Okay, thimerosal was taken out of childhood vaccines in 2001. Angels, Monts, varicella, for a complete list of vaccines and the thimerosal content levels. So they're out of child vaccines. I guess they left them in adult vaccines. I need to see what they found here. Mercury is a naturally occurring element found in Earth's crust, etc., etc. Methylmercury is a type of mercury found in certain kinds of fish. In the United States, federal guidelines keep as much methylmercury as possible out of the environment and food, but over a lifetime, everyone is exposed to some methylmercury. Thimerosal contains ethylmercury, which is cleared from the human body more quickly than methylmercury and is therefore less likely to cause any harm. We know the purpose. It's a preservative. It was removed from children's vaccines. What the research shows? Fact. Thimerosal use in medical products has a record of being very safe. Data from many studies show no evidence of harm caused by the low dose in vaccines. And now they actually have some sources. Okay, Pediatrics 2010, 2007, 2009, 2003. Yeah, so not only is this well cited, this is old research as well, meaning like we've known this for a while. And it's not something that's going to suddenly change. And if it does, we'll see it in data. We have to see it in data, right? We're not going to make new decisions on policy from a gut feeling. At least not sweeping ones, maybe a precautionary change. Let's see. There were no findings of increased risk for any of the 3 ASD outcomes. The adjusted odds ratios, 95% confidence intervals for ASD associated with a 2SD increase in ethyl mercury exposure were 1.2 for prenatal exposure and 0.88 for exposure from birth to 1 month, 0.66 for exposure from birth to 7 months, and 0.6 for exposure from birth to 20 months. In our study of MCO members' prenatal and early life exposure to ethyl mercury from thimerosal-containing vaccines and immunoglobulin preparations was not related to increased risk of ASDs. What are ASDs? Oh, this is specifically for autism. Okay. Yeah, and the interesting thing here is it's also, this isn't for adults, this is just for children. So even though they've removed this preservative from, children's vaccines, they show that there is no increased risk of autism. I need to read the others to see what other risks might be included. My understanding is the primary concern is autism, but there could be other concerns, and I want to give those due diligence, not just the autism, but I know autism was the primary concern. At least that's what most people say. It looks like there is a drawdown, like the results are safer the older the child is. Let's see. Autism, the adjusted odd ratios. Okay, so these are odd ratios. Yeah, the odds go down as the child gets older. So not only are they statistically insignificant when they are children, they go down substantially as they get older, which to me is a great reason for them to say, you know what, let's take it out of children's vaccines, but keep it in adults. It probably doesn't matter. It probably wouldn't even matter for the children's vaccines, but as a precautionary measure, we have other preservatives that we can use that would cause less of an uproar here. So let's stick with that. Let's see what else they got here. Early thimerosal exposure and neurophysical outcomes at 7 to 10 years. So this is even a little bit older. Among the 42 neuropsychological outcomes, we detected only a few significant associations with exposure to mercury from thimerosal. Few significant associations. What does that mean? The detected associations were small and almost equally divided between positive and negative effects. Higher prenatal mercury exposure was associated with better performance on one measure of language and poor performance on one measure of attention and executive functioning. Increasing levels of mercury exposure from birth to 7 months were associated with better performance on one measure of fine motor coordination and on one measure of attention and executive functioning. Increasing mercury exposure from birth to 28 days was associated with poor performance on one measure. Okay, so the conclusion is our study does not support a causal association between early exposure to mercury from thimerosal-containing vaccines and immune globulins and deficits in neuropsychological functioning at the age of 7 to 10 years. Was this... Okay, 1,000 children assessing 42 neuropsychological outcomes. Okay, that's what I wanted to check. I wanted to check if they meant they only had 42 children or they had 42 different neuropsychological outcomes. Only a few significant ones. Small and almost equally divided among positive and negative effects. So at the very least, I don't even know that I want to say that. It just seems like, yeah, there's no causal association, it seems. Okay. 10 years after immunization. Self-maintenance. I think these are all basically autism. That last one did say 42 different neuropsychological conditions. I didn't go through each one, but mostly for mercury. Okay, well, let's go back to the main article here and see what they are voting on. Okay. So new vaccine advisors voting on flu shots containing mercury. So these are flu shots. These aren't necessarily like childhood vaccines or even really adult vaccines. Would that still technically be a vaccine? I mean, like, yes, it's a vaccine in that you get a shot and that it immunizes you against the flu. But in this case, are they categorized the same way by the FDA? I believe that would mean that, yes, they are the same, meaning that there would be like mercury in flu shots, and flu shots are typically only given to adults. I don't think, are they given to children? I don't have any kids, if you couldn't tell. And I certainly didn't when I was a kid. Think we can afford that stuff? No. Recommended and widely given to children. Okay. How about Marisol? In children's flu vaccines. I assume they've been removed, right? Some formulations of an inactivated influenza vaccine for children may still contain thimerosal as a preservative. However, thimerosal is not currently used in vaccines routinely recommended for children aged 6 years and younger in the U.S., with the exception of certain influenza vaccine formulations. Availability. For those who prefer a thimerosal-free flu vaccine for their children, single-dose flu shots are available for anyone age 6 months and older, and nasal spray vaccine is available for those aged 2 through 49. As a precautionary measure, some states have implemented laws that limit or prohibit the use of thimerosal in vaccines for young children and pregnant women, although exceptions may be made during these times of vaccine shortages. Okay, so there are still some that have thimerosal in them, but again, remember, they did not find any statistically significant correlations between the neuropsychological conditions that you might develop and the mercury, the thimerosal, in the flu vaccine. And even if they did, there are non-mercury based alternatives available. So what is the point of them voting on this? A government vaccine advisory panel recently reconstituted by the head of Health and Human Services is scheduled to vote on thimerosal containing vaccines during their meeting on June 26th. This follows Kennedy's dismissal of all 17 previous committee members and appointment of 8 new advisors, many known as vaccine critics, to put it gently. Thimerosal has long served as a preservative in multi-dose vaccines to inhibit bacterial combination, though its application has decreased as vaccine manufacturers have increasingly adopted single-dose formats. Now, that's another interesting thing to remember. I don't know that I've ever seen a flu vaccine that is multi-dose. Anyone that I've ever gotten has always been single-dose, so I can't imagine any of those would have had thimerosal in them. There's no need to have a preservative in a single-dose vaccine. As long as you administer it within the shelf life, it is preserved. According to the FDA, research conducted over more than 2 decades has found no indications that thimerosal in vaccines causes harm, including any serious neurodevelopmental conditions. The committee will also review data on other vaccines, including COVID and RSV shots, influencing U.S. immunization policy amid ongoing debates about vaccine safety. You say anything else here? That seems uninformative, just that they're going to be voting on flu shots containing mercury. Voting what? Right now, we don't have a lot of them, and if we do, there are non-mercury containing options available, and it sounds like they're going to keep moving away from that, because at the very least, I think the general public just kind of doesn't like the idea, right? That like, oh, there might be mercury in there, it might be not so great for my kids, I want to do what's best for my kids. I think any parent who is on top of that and cares will ask their doctor for, a mercury-free version. So I think that, yeah, most companies realize that most people just, they don't feel good about it, and so they'll move away from it. And that has been the decision of the FDA for quite a while, it sounds like. So, new panel, vote on flu shots. Advisors to consider MMRV vaccines, thimerosal containing flu shots, and pared down meeting. Are there any? It would just be multi-dose ones, right? What flu vaccines? Thimerosal. Refilled syringes. Most of the flu vaccine supply produced for recent seasons, like 23, 24, 24, 25, is thimerosal free or thimerosal reduced. Interesting. So they have a reduced option as well, which we already saw insignificant correlations between neuropsychological development and thimerosal intake in young kids and prenatals. More routinely recommended vaccines for children 6 years of age and younger in the U.S. are available in formulations. Okay. Specific multi-dose flu vaccines may contain thimerosal, include Alpharia, Flucelavax, Fluzone. The point of multi-dose flu vaccine. Is this just something for children that I've never seen before? Contain multiple doses in a single vial, serve several key purposes. Reduce costs, less cold storage, facilitates. Wait. Less cold storage? Are you saying that they sterilize it and reuse the needle, or reduce cost? One multi-dose vial occupies less space than multiple individual pre-filled syringes. Easing storage challenges. Lower production time. I assume they're not using the same needle. I assume it's just like a vial that can be input to a new clean needle. Need for preservatives, potential contamination, staffing complexity. Yeah. Why would you use multi-dose over single dose? Oh, here's something by the NIH. What do you know? Single dose versus multi-dose vaccine vials for immunization programs in developing countries. So not quite what I'm looking for, but this could be beneficial. When was this? 2003, so it's been a little while. And this was all about vaccine wastage and safety. This has nothing to do with efficacy of the medication. Multi versus single dose vaccine efficacy. What did the NIH say? Now, this is the same thing. Mm-hmm. Vaccine wastage. I'm not immediately seeing any reason why you would want to use multi over single. It could just be as simple as manufacturing and cost and storage and like all the logistics behind creating a vaccine. It may not have anything to do with why, you know, like why it might be more effective or less effective. And what that would mean to me is that most likely there's going to be multiple options available, which is what we've seen, both single and multi-dose available. And the type of vaccine that you get is probably going to be related to choice of, you know, manufacturer, who you're willing to pay for with your doctor, just because both formulations are available and don't really have a substantial difference between the two of them. The real main difference is that since one is multi-dose, it requires a preservative to maintain its shelf life for longer, which in this case is usually thimerosal, at least for most adult vaccines and for some kids vaccines. But they have other options available because there has been pushback on that, even though they don't have any correlation between neuropsychological disorders and thimerosal in vaccines. Okay. I'm mostly just curious about the language that they're using in these articles because thimerosal has long served as a preservative in multi-dose vaccines to inhibit bacterial contamination, though its application has decreased as vaccine manufacturers have increasingly adopted single-dose formats. I was mostly curious just because they kind of bounce around the different formulations and the different types, but it brings me back to what's the point of them voting on this? Why do they need to make a change to the way the current documentation is done? Like the current protocol seems pretty sufficient to me, seems fine. Like you're not forced to get thimerosal. You're not going to be swindled into it. There's plenty of options available outside of that. And even if you were forced to, even if there was some kind of a shortage, there is no statistically correlated evidence, which I suppose this all could go back to you just don't trust institutions and you don't believe in any of these articles that I'm reading and say burn it all down. If that's the case, I don't think we can work together. I don't know what to do to have this discussion with you. You are the kind of person, I guess, that wants to, you know, be completely libertarian and live out on their own ranch somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And that's fine. You can want that and be distrustful of everybody. But two things. One, I don't think that lifestyle is maintainable anymore. Our population is increasing at too much of a rate for that to be possible. The only way that that becomes possible is if you decide and everybody else decides we're not having any more kids. We're not going to bring anybody else into this world. We don't have the room for it. We don't have the space. I want my own private ranch in the middle of nowhere and for nobody to bother me and for that to work. So it can't work because most everybody wants kids. And secondly, in order for us to function and move forward as a society, we have to have institutions. We have to have these, you know, organizations that do this research and do this understanding of science and set this policy. Because if they didn't, then we would have the Wild West of before the FDA was created and before these organizations were created, where anybody could just come into any market with any sort of a snake oil and pretend to sell you, you know, the cure for cancer, when in reality, it's a stimulant. They're giving you, you know, some cocaine or whatever. And yeah, it makes you feel better. It makes you think that you're getting better. But in reality, it's a lie. Your body just thinks it's feeling better. It doesn't actually get rid of any of the cancer. As a matter of fact, it probably accelerates the growth of the cancer because it is a stimulant. But by the time you figure out that they lied to you and swindled you, they're gone and they have taken your money. That's a world that I don't want to go back to. And the only way that we are able to move forward is to not blindly trust the institutions, mind you. I'm not saying that. We do definitely hold them accountable and make sure that there's a lot of academic rigor behind their research. But I would say at the very basics of it, we have to have these institutions. They have to exist in some form. Okay. That might be everything on ground news I want to cover. Let's see. Civil Rights Agency acting chair to face questions on anti-DEI transgender stances. FDA to offer faster drug reviews to companies promoting national priorities. I mean, I'm kind of okay with that, but who defines national priority? He announced the Commissioner's National Priority Voucher pilot program to speed drug reviews aligned with U.S. national interests. The program follows the failure of Congress to renew the Rare Disease Priority Review Voucher by the end of 2024 and aims to incentivize timely drug development. CNPV reviews will convene multidisciplinary expert teams in tumor board-style meetings and can shorten review times from 10 to 12 months to 1 or 2 months. Cool. Dr. Marty McCary highlighted that shortening the review period to 1 month could create significant financial incentives for companies, potentially increasing their market valuation substantially, while ensuring the scientific assessments remain independent and free from inappropriate influence. Although advocates welcome faster access to therapy, some critics worry that accelerated reviews might risk patient safety and comprehensive monitoring of long-term effects. Is this just for like rare disease cases, or let's see, the CNPV? Yeah, rare disease priority review voucher. So I think that critique is somewhat worthwhile and worthy, and we should definitely keep a close eye on the statistics behind any of these drugs that get approved. But the reason behind this is because these are for rare diseases, for diseases that we might see in, 1,000 or even just a minor million people globally, something like that. Most pharmaceutical companies, drug manufacturers, are not going to see a financial benefit in producing drugs for rare diseases. There's no money in it. There's not enough people that care about it unless the government steps in with some sort of, financial support or reasoning behind it. So given our competitive, free market, this is just something that wouldn't normally exist without the intervention of government. And as a result, the populations that we have involved are probably going to be pretty small and are definitely worthy of making sure that we monitor their long-term effects and the patient safety and risk, etc. But at the same time, even if we compromise some of that to shorten these reviews down from 10 to 12 months to 1 to 2, I feel like we would still need to do a cost-benefit analysis there, but I still feel like the benefit would outweigh the cost in that case. Like, sure, there might be some extra risk there for long-term studies, but at the end of the day, if they're really not getting the funding anyways to produce medications for rare diseases, then like, what's the point, right? Also, just like as I think about it, 10 to 12 months for review, like that is a long time for these new medications to be reviewed. Like, really, it should be shorter than that, I would hope. Obviously, long-term reporting and review still needs to continue from the manufacturer of the drug, but in order to get it on the market, a year. I mean, think about it. If you had one of those rare diseases, that could mean a world of difference for you, whether you're able to get a brand new medication today or next year. And it's more than just a year. It's also, how much time goes behind the clinical trial itself and the development of the drug and getting enough of it produced for people. And like it might not just be a year. It might be several years before something like that hits the market or is even able to. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman says any American intervention would be a recipe for an all-out war. Field to Heaven flag displayed above SBA headquarters. Dargan cave findings reveal humans lived in Australia's Blue Mountains during last ice age. Okay. Just want to glance at this document about the Iranian-Israeli conflict. Yeah. this is just something that I've seen on panels recently where there's people arguing back and forth on whether the US should, step in and be full force behind this offensive, or should just completely back off and say it's not our deal. It's, like America first and let Israel handle it. It's not our responsibility. I think that this helps to clearly show that I don't think the US should outright step up and say, hey, we're taking over, we're taking the fight to Iran, we're shutting this down, because Iran has already made it clear that anything that looks like that would be like they're probably going to flail pretty heavily based on that. So like unless we're willing to escalate that conflict and yes, to step in and suppress it until it's over, then I don't think we need to step up that high, because we're just going to stoke the flames that we might not ready be prepared to deal with. But I don't think we should pull out entirely either, because if Iran is developing nuclear weapons and has been shown to be an enemy basically of the Western world and of the United States and Israel and a lot of our allies, then that's not something that we can just let go, right? We can't let them develop nuclear weapons without joining into whatever our treaties are and our expectations are, because even a small nuclear war, let's say Iran does develop nuclear weapons and just launches a small yield warhead on Israel, the nuclear fallout from that and other problems that'd be associated would be catastrophic. Like even that would be enough to shut things down, let alone, a full out nuclear winter. So I would think that the best idea is somewhere in the middle, where the United States doesn't have to completely step up and say, we're taking over, we're doing this. Let Israel take the fight to Iran, provide them with, intel and military supports and vehicles and technology, whatever they need to handle those special kind of missions, especially because from what I understand, these nuclear development facilities are located pretty deeply underground and would require bunker busters to penetrate at all without, like assuming you're not willing to commit thousands of men to try to clear them out, and to invade a country specifically. But I would think that would be the best option, because then that helps to suppress the nuclear development in Iran, keeps them in check, and doesn't require that the United States gets fully involved and has a big PR stunt and like, oh no, we're starting yet another war in the Middle East. And I think as long as we're able to provide them that technology and that support, they should be able to handle it. Israel has already shown that they are more than willing to take the fight to them and know where their facilities are. And as long as they have the right technology behind them to support it, they're able to strike with, I would say, fairly good precision. I would need to look into that more to see if there's been an unacceptable amount of collateral damage. But my understanding is that they have been very precise in their strikes, and like I say, have demonstrated that they are more than willing to take the fight to Iran for this, which they should. They are really close to Iran, and Iran does not like them at all. I think if they did develop a nuclear program, Israel would probably be on the first of the list to get a, little test nuke. Okay. Let's see here. Slides are analyzing. It's already been an hour. Okay. I think now I'm just going to look and see if there's any interesting YouTube up. And if there is, we might watch that and comment on it a little bit. And if not, then we might just go ahead and end the stream, because mainly I just wanted to go over some of the news stuff that I'd been seeing. We did cover that. So let's see. I'm gonna stretch my neck a little bit. Let's see. Looks like Powell did a recent news conference. Was the FOMC meeting today? think it was. Used to track that stuff meticulously, but recently I just haven't cared as much. So let's bring that up. Let's see what he had to say about it. It seemed a little loud.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Kelly O'Grady, CBS News. You're famously known as the guy that makes decisions.
Let's see here. What have I got? Is it my headphones or? Okay, yeah, my headphones are cranked up. That's why.
Based on data instead of speculation. You've said today the inflation data is in a good place. We don't know how tariffs are going to impact prices going forward. That's uncertain. But I've got to go back to the last time that you cut rates in December, and there was still the what if of tariffs. So what made you feel comfortable cutting then when inflation was higher than where it is today and you didn't cut today?
Well, the forecast for inflation in December was 2.5. Core PCE for 2025, the forecast was 2.5%, which is a good inflation forecast. I think what we've learned is that, and this was long before we had any idea of what the actual policies would be, we've learned that tariffs are going to be substantially larger than forecasters generally thought. And, we don't, our forecasts are generally not particularly different from those of other, well-resourced forecasting operations. So what we learned, and particularly in April, was that very substantially larger tariffs were coming and that would mean higher inflation. That's what happened. And so you saw 2.5% forecast in December, you saw 2.8% in March, and you see 3.1% now. So it's 0.6 higher inflation for 2025, and that's a big part of the change, and that's due to the effects of the tariffs that are, we don't know where they're going to land, but it's pretty apparent they're going to land higher than outside forecasters were really guessing at the end of last year.
My follow-up to that, consumers, right, we're looking for relief on rates when it comes to mortgages, car loans. Small businesses want to take out more manageable loans. When you look at the cumulative inflation over the past 5 years, prices have risen over 20%. It's been a rough road. So what is the tipping point then for the wait and see approach in terms of how much it's going to help versus when it hurts the American consumer?
Well, we're trying to restore price. Best thing we can do for the public that we serve is restore price stability. If we can, and we will, restore price stability, meaning 2% inflation on a durable, sustainable basis, that, and also maximum employment. If we restore those things, that's the best thing, and that is our goal. The best thing we can do for the American people, for households and businesses, that is the ultimate thing that we can deliver. And they can make their decisions without having to think about inflation all the time. So in the meantime, we have to keep rates high to get inflation all the way down. They're not very high, let's be honest. I would say policy is modestly or moderately, probably modestly now restrictive. If you look at the economy, it's not performing as though it were performing under very strict monetary policy, very restrictive monetary policy. So I would say probably modestly restrictive. And so what it will take is confidence that inflation is coming down. Now, I would say without tariffs, that confidence would be building, because if you see what's happening with non-housing services and housing services, which are the other two big pieces other than goods, those are coming down really nicely now. So I think we have to learn a little more about tariffs. I don't know what the right way for us to react will be. I think it's hard to know with any confidence how we should react until we see really the size of the effects, and then we can start to make a better judgment. So that's what we're doing, and I think we can take the time to do that because unemployment is 4.2%. Wages are moving up. Real wages are moving up at a healthy clip now. And inflation is 2.3% headline inflation over a 12-month basis. So it's a good economy and a solid economy with decent growth.
Seems to me like a fairly good and sly way for Jerome Powell to say, hey, the economy doesn't look terrible. Inflation is kind of returning back to normal, getting back to low states of around 2%. We need a little more time and confidence to ensure that that's the case, because as I'm looking at this now, you can see even back in December and January, it was, up closer to 3% and bounced around a little bit. So we don't want to be overly optimistic about that, but also employment is still fairly high, like unemployment is low. And overall, the economy and the markets seem to be doing okay. The one thing that is holding us back from dropping rates or being more confident about the future is tariffs, and we don't really know how to respond to those. We'll have to see. And I see this as a very smart move. And the analogy that I would use is you're on a road trip, right? You're in a car and you are accelerating at a nominal rate, and the people in the car are saying like, hey, why are we going so slow? Like, you can speed up, right? Like, we look ahead, like things are fine. I don't know of any problems coming up, but you as the driver know, there's a section coming up here where we start getting a fairly steep downhill gradient, or there might be, I don't know, maybe I'm not perfectly familiar with this area. This could be more analogous to our situation, because the tariffs could happen, they could not happen, or even if they do, it's kind of a new policy. Like, we don't really know how to react to it. So in that case, being the driver of the car, you would think like, well, I don't necessarily know what's coming, but the rumor is it's going to be a big downhill stretch and accelerate us even more. If we were to make the decision today to accelerate and speed up, and we happen to hit on this downhill run, and maybe we need to apply brakes, it's going to be much harder for us to do so if we've already accelerated very heavily before getting to that point. So instead, we should approach this cautiously and maintain our current speed and heading until we can say with more confidence, oh yeah, we can accelerate because I know that there's no downhill up ahead, or even other than that, there is an uphill coming, and we need to accelerate in order to combat against it. So I think this is a very smart way for Jerome Powell to say, overall, the economy looks pretty good. We're kind of restabilizing, at least for now, but we will see what happens with these tariffs, because they're kind of a big deal, and they could drastically change our policy going forward. We're not sure. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Anything else that's interesting to watch? More news. And volumes. Kind of hard to figure out. Okay. Schumer talking about the GOP budget.
All right. And so as you know, in the last 3 weeks, the first week we focused on Medicaid rather. Second week on rising costs for families and lost jobs in America. And this third week we're talking about taxes, but they're all related because we all know what they're doing. They're giving tax cuts to the billionaires and hurting, whether it's on Medicaid, on SNAP, on so many other issues, including taxes themselves, hurting the average person, the American family, as you can see. Red, 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 till you get to be rich. So, and for weeks, Senate Republicans promised they'd take their dangerous, unpopular House bill and fix its worst provision.
I just want to say one thing that's interesting to point out about that, since we previously talked about Medicare and its upcoming risk of insolvency. They mentioned that the two ways out of it, the two possibilities of fixing it, are one, to either increase taxes, increase the inflow into the Medicare system, or reduce costs out of it, the cost of healthcare. Which one way to do that is to cut Medicare benefits. So one could argue that the current administration, they are trying to push for cuts out of Medicare, so they're trying to help solve that insolvency issue by reducing those cuts. But I would argue here that is, while it is technically true, that is an incorrect way of dealing with this problem, because they are cutting aid to people who need it, right? Medicare exists for those who are, beyond working age or unable to pay for their health care for whatever reason, maybe a disability. and I believe Medicaid is low income. But these are people who definitely need those support systems, right? And for the most part, those are paid for by taxes, and the taxes are getting more or less increased on low income earners, which is going to put more stress on them. The lower your income, the more stress it's going to put on you, because the lower your income, the more likely you are to use those Medicare benefits. And the taxes are being reduced on the highest income earners who aren't paying as much into the system as the low income earners, and they don't need to use the same safety nets for obvious reasons. They either have access to better healthcare, or they come from better circumstances, or are just luckier, whatever it is. Regardless, the solution should not be let's suck this out of the lower half of the United States and cut benefits. The solution, I think, should be the billionaires are doing pretty well here, and Medicare's a little bit insolvent. They definitely should try to cut costs, right? Like, I think that's a top thing that they should be looking at for sure, trying to cut the cost of healthcare, or at the very least put reins in on it so that it doesn't just keep flying away. But the second step to that should be, like, billionaires are doing pretty well. Maybe they don't need quite as low taxes as we've been giving them. Instead, maybe we should look at increasing those, because as of right now, we cannot sustain our current Medicare system.
Senators went home and told their constituents, oh, don't worry, this will change, that'll change. They said they were listening to their constituents. They lied. They lied. Many of them claimed they would draw red lines on cuts to Medicaid or clean energy or food assistance. But now we know the truth. But now that we've seen the Senate Republicans' big, beautiful betrayal, we know what's in it. They didn't fix the House or improve the House bill. They made it far, far worse. The Senate Republican bill is, simply put, bigger cuts, bigger betrayal. Here are 5 ways, there are many, but I thought I'd point out 5, and please indulge me a minute, that the Senate bill is even worse, more extreme, more destructive, more cruel than the House version. 1, the Medicaid cuts are deeper, with more pain, more people losing their health care. Now it's over $1 trillion. The House bill originally was $880 billion at its peak. 16 million Americans, maybe more, will lose health care. Tens of millions more will have their insurance premiums, health insurance premiums, go way up. So it's going to hurt a large chunk of America, just about all of working class America, and including middle class America. The Republicans in the Senate have loved to talk about protecting Medicaid. A whole bunch of them called it a red line. But with this bill, it's not a red line, it's a dare. Their plan guts health care even more than the House bill. Democrats are happy to work with Republicans to rid Medicaid of any waste, fraud, or abuse. But this isn't that. This is repeal and replace by another name. The Senate bill squeezes hospitals even harder than the House bill. It crushes health centers and decimates rural hospitals. The healthcare sector alone would lose close to 1 million jobs. When you add that to the clean energy job loss, you're pointing at a recession. Second, the clean energy bill, it kills jobs and raises costs. Senate Republicans spent weeks promising everybody, including their governors, including the companies and unions and others who are working in all of this new clean energy manufacturing, that they would change the House bill. Instead, the Senate clean energy proposal is a head fake. They try to make it seem like they're making it better, but they don't, particularly in the core areas of wind and solar. The Senate clean energy bill cuts are every bit as destructive as the House proposal. It phases out credits for wind and solar within 6 months. These phase-outs are a death sentence for clean energy. They're going to send electric bills soaring, kill good-paying jobs. An estimated 850,000 people in the clean energy industry will lose their jobs. And despite all the rhetoric from Trump and the Republicans, We're going to surrender U.S. energy independence to China. China will dominate, particularly in the fastest, cheapest way to bring new electrons onto the grid, which is solar. China's going to dominate and have American consumers by the neck.
I think that's not correct, and I want to check into this. My understanding is the way that China dominates the energy market going forward is through nuclear power, not through green energy. My understanding with green energy is that it is not the way for us to energy independence. As a matter of fact, it's kind of problematic when it comes to energy independence because of the fact that it is not incredibly, like, it doesn't produce a ton of power compared to other methods. And on top of that, it requires a lot of land and a lot of legislation to get through. You know, people don't necessarily want windmills in their backyard. And there's still a reason you do clean energy, green energy, and it's because of global warming and emissions and trying to offset that and reduce that. There's also other grid reasons, I believe, like, black starting a nuclear reactor. You can't just start a nuclear reactor with no power being fed into it. Green energy is a great way to help kickstart those nuclear reactors so that they can start up when they need to off of a black start. And having a flexible grid like that is beneficial going forward. But overall, I don't think that green energy is as powerful as he says it is. It's really just a way to offset carbon emissions and to help strengthen the flexibility of the grid. But let me check that. How much green energy in China? I don't even know that that's a major contributor. I suppose they do a lot with like hydroelectricity and whatnot. Generated approximately 30% of its electricity from renewable sources. This includes wind, solar, hydroelectric, and geothermal. While China is still heavily reliant on coal, it is also the world's leader in the renewable energy department. Blah, blah, blah. And expected to have at least 2,400 gigawatts of renewable electrical capacity installed by 2030, doubling the 2022 picture. Okay. So they actually are doing quite a bit with renewable energy. How about nuclear energy? Because I am surprised at the proportion, the 30% of it being in China. What I'm not surprised about is them having a drastic need to increase their power output, just because their population is so high and so vast. China is a country that literally struggles to feed itself because it holds 20% of the world's population and only has 10% of the world's arable land. So they literally can't grow enough food to feed themselves. They have to import it. And it's because they have so many mouths to feed. It's the same kind of thing with power. Although, obviously power is probably not quite as critically important as food, but their population is massive and can increase at an exponential rate, even with a limitation on how many children they can have. So looking forward into the future for energy development, I would think that they would want to make sure that all avenues are heavily increased. So I'm surprised that they're already at 30% for green energy, but I'm not surprised that that would be a goal for them to be at. I would think that even in our grid, a 30% green energy would be a pretty reasonable goal, because that, I think, meets our expectations for offsetting carbon emissions, but also having enough of a grid established that we can do black starts if we need to, and not be completely out if some other power plant goes down. So China's a major player in nuclear energy, currently holding the third largest nuclear power capacity globally. As of early 2024, they have 58 operable reactors with a net capacity of 56 gigawatt ease. What's that? And 32 more under construction. What's GWE? Gigawatt electric. Wind energy. Yeah, so it's obviously gigawatt electric. So a gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. Is it the same thing? Power plants, gigawatt is related, but think terms, gigawatt refers to the total power generated often by heat input, while gigawatt refers to... Oh, okay. So the difference is how much power that plant actually produces versus how much of it actually gets to the grid. Whereas in a nuclear reactor, right, some of that power is dissipated. It's a nuclear reaction happening inside of a nuclear reactor core, which then pumps heated water through steam generators that run a turbine, right? There's some energy loss to inefficiencies in the heat transfer, and also some energy loss into things like heat dissipation through the pool and through the cooling towers, things like that. So the main difference would be, how much thermal energy is actually produced by the reactor versus how much of it actually gets to the grid. So the main thing I'm curious about now is, how does that compare to, let's see, the green energy they said was how many gigawatts? Did I read that correctly? I swear I... 584 terawatts in 2023? Yeah, where did I read the gigawatts? Oh, it was at the bottom here, future projections. Yeah. They're expected to have at least 2,400 gigawatts of renewable electricity capacity installed by 2030. Okay, so they're not quite up to that. And even if they were, this is gigawatts and not gigawatt electric. This is, again, the total thermal energy produced, the total wattage produced, and not what actually meets the grid. But regardless, so anyways, long way to get on a bit of a tangent there, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. Let's see. Green energy in the U.S. Actually, closer to 9%. Let's see. 2023, roughly 20% of electricity generated in the U.S. came from renewable sources, like blah, 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 when considering all forms of energy consumption, not just electricity. Renewables accounted for about 9% of the total. Most of it's fossil fuels. Okay. All right. So technically what Schumer said there is true. China per capita proportionally beats the US in renewable energy sources as of right now. But he seems to imply that this is a problem and something that we're going to get outcompeted in, and it's going to raise our prices like crazy. And I don't think that that's directly necessarily the case. We could be more competitive by adding more green energy sources, but we could also be more competitive by adding more dirty energy sources, more coal plants, more, the first thing that comes to mind is natural gas, but that's not dirty either way. Or, we could even add more nuclear if we wanted to, and that wouldn't increase the price of electricity, hopefully. So I don't understand the conflation here between China having a ton of green energy and American electricity prices going ridiculously higher. So let's continue.
The cuts will choke America's energy output right as we need to expand our capacity. AI is going to demand huge amounts of electricity. It's going to cost.
That's right. So he gets on this tangent because he's talking about the cuts to the green energy in the bill, which I do see that as a problem. Cutting green energy, I think that that's something that we should still be supporting and striving for. I don't think it'll be as catastrophic as he's saying, especially if we put more investment into other areas, but I don't see a plan to do that. I only see cuts here, which certainly isn't going to make things better, certainly isn't going to help with our inability to power things. And like he's about to say, AI is going to require a lot of power going forward, and that seems to be the next big thing that industry wants to push.
Cost the consumer more as prices go up. Why the hell would you cut off the quickest, cheapest way to bring in new power? And some of those who say on the Republican, well, we're for all of the above. We don't like the Democrats being against fossil fuels. Well, fossil fuels get lots of tax breaks. They always have. Now they're eliminating them just for clean energy. 3, gun violence. Now, can you believe this? That horrible House provision on gun silencers, saying you no longer had to go through a background check to use a gun silencer, and the only people who use silencers are bad people. Cops don't like silencers. Average citizens don't like silencers. Only somebody who's going to shoot and doesn't want it to be known they're shooting. But they made it worse. I'm the author of the Brady Law. I'm the author of the assault weapons ban. I know the history. And one of the bottom lines for everybody in the past, even Republicans, is that shotguns and rifles should have background checks. Guess what? They took them away in the Senate bill. Years of history and compromise. Years of saying everyone knew that these guns were too dangerous, they took it off. Now, if they get their way, silencers, as in the House bill, and shotguns and rifles added in the Senate bill will not lead a background check. Anyone, any criminal can get them. Now, we are contesting this and other provisions in the bird bath. We're hopeful we can win. We'll see what happens. But we are contesting it in every way we can because Senate Republicans are choosing the gun lobby over the lives of our kids. I don't know what happened. I can surmise. A bunch of the right-wingers said, we didn't get all the cuts we wanted. So they said, we'll give you this. Who knows? Fourth, attacking our courts. Speaking of fighting against a radical plan by the Senate Republicans, look at what they're doing to the courts. Now, you might be confused. You say, this is a tax bill. Why are Republicans trying to push something on the courts? We'll do the math. Trump is losing in court over 95% of the time. Some of us have been plaintiffs in suits. Many times, other times we worked with other groups and we were amici or just helped them. We're winning in the courts. And you know, all too frequently, guess who's siding with us? Judges Trump appointed in his first term. The House bill would have prevented courts from enforcing injunctions if plaintiffs didn't put up massive security bonds. The Senate, not to be outdone, makes it worse, preventing courts from even issuing injunctions against the federal government in the first place if plaintiffs don't put up a massive, unaffordable to so many security bond. So they're trying to make the justice system pay to play for our sacred, respected, until now, relatively following the law, not always, unfortunately, particularly with this new Supreme Court, but they're changing it. If you don't have money, you don't get justice. That's never been the American way. Senate Republicans are doing Trump's bidding, and they're trying to protect him by stopping courts from issuing injunctions. This is our democracy. We're going after it. We're not going down without a fight. This and many other provisions, the gun provision and many others, we are challenging with the parliamentarian because we don't think it meets the actual criteria for that. And finally, on taxes, where my two colleagues, members of the Finance Committee, will elaborate. But given all these devastating cuts, you'd have to assume the Republicans would say, okay, we'll lower the national debt. Nope, quite the opposite. CBO yesterday said that the House-passed bill would increase the debt by $3.4 trillion, surging interest rates on every American. That means when you buy a home, you buy a car, you use a credit card, you're going to pay more because of the tax cuts for billionaires. Now, it's not even considering the Senate bill. That was 3.4. It's even more generous than the House and locks these tax breaks. And here they are. Look at the very top 10% get a nice increase in their income. Look at the others. Poorest people lose $2,500. That's a lot of money for anybody. But if you're poor, it's devastating. Under the so-called middle-class provisions, the wealthiest 0.1% get an average tax cut of $400,000. What does it mean to your family? Fewer benefits, higher costs. We're going to do everything we can with the court of public opinion and in the vote-a-rama process to show the hypocrisy of what the Republicans are doing, and to elaborate on that hypocrisy, we have Ron Wyden.
Much different there with the bill. I didn't realize that they added provisions for guns. Looks like it's just for silencers in particular. I don't care too much about that myself. I'm left-leaning, but I also own guns, and I feel like, you know what? We're American. We've decided that it's a constitutional right for people to own guns and to exist in this, type of world. We can change that if we want to, but I think it's deeply ingrained into our culture. So there's going to be a lot of resistance to that. And I'm fine more or less keeping things the way that they are. With some exceptions. I like what Schumer said there about requiring background checks for every kind of gun that you purchase. I think that should be required. I do see that they are, tools either for destruction or for fun, depending on how you use them. And most everybody should be allowed to have them, but there should be, they should be, I think, regulated in the same way that a car is, right? Like most everybody has the right to drive a car, but we don't give it to those who can't pass a driver's course or prove that they are safe with it. For whatever reason, we allow gun owners to, bypass that particular requirement. And so I'm in support of that, but I don't care too much about them repealing taxes on silencers for guns. I don't see how that one contributes to issues with our children as far as shootings and things go. Like he said, only criminals, only bad guys use silencers. Like, sure, I guess, but either way, that doesn't protect people. That doesn't how many of these shootings have you ever heard of where they used a silencer or whatever because they didn't want to be found or caught? Or it's just never the case. And either way, decreasing the taxes on it isn't going to make a dent in that. I didn't see anything else in the bill regarding background checks, so I don't think that was actually part of it. It sounds like talking point, but in any case, I didn't know that there was something there for firearms. Let's see, maybe one more. This one could be fun.
I feel like I've been neglecting.
Come on. Do energy drinks cause cancer? It's something my mother brings up to me quite a bit. So let's see what Dr. Mike has to say about it.
Your comments, not answering your questions like a good doctor's supposed to do. So let's get to that. Huge thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this to treat small cuts. No. Why? Whose first instinct to get a cut and go, pooh? That's a weird instinct. That's what dogs do. And that's why I have to put the cone on the dog. Do you want me to put the cone on you? The human mouth has so much polymicrobial activity that if you get a human bite, you desperately need broad antibiotic coverage. Every now and then I wake up in the middle of the night with sleep paralysis and can't move. It's so scary. Is there any way to prevent it? 30-ish% of adults in their lifetime will have one episode of sleep paralysis. So it is fairly common. Trying to do your best to focus on sleep hygiene, making sure that you're not napping too close to bedtime, you're not over consuming alcohol, caffeinated products will help. Sometimes there's an underlying physical or mental health disorder that needs to be addressed. So doing a sleep study could be valuable, potentially getting a visit with a psychiatrist or a psychologist to see if there's a medication or therapies on board that can help. Very commonly for patients that have insomnia, I've been recommending CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy focused specifically for insomnia.
Interesting.
Can joints get stronger? Joints themselves are not strong or weak. Joints can be damaged, which can make them feel weaker, but the strength of a joint comes from the connective tissue and muscular tissue surrounding them. For example, when someone has, let's say, osteoarthritis of their knee, part of what we do in physical therapy is strengthening the muscles that end up protecting the knee while you walk. Because if you don't have good protection, every time you're taking a step, whether it's on your hip, on your knee, especially if you're carrying excess weight, you're putting more and wear and tear on that joint. My fiance refuses to take antibiotics because she's afraid it will kill all her good bacteria. Is there any truth to this? Taking antibiotics should be a decision that is medically decided with the notion of increasing benefit and decreasing harm. If you have a viral infection, which most people do when they they have upper respiratory symptoms, taking antibiotics is not a good move because you will be harming your good bacteria, and there is no bad bacteria to be had and attack. But if you're really sick, if you're experiencing pneumonia, if you're experiencing strep throat, which can lead to rheumatic fever, there are instances where antibiotics should be used because we know that the benefit outweighs the harm. Does it harm good bacteria? Yeah. It also impacts your gut microbiome, which we still don't fully understand, but we do know that there is such thing as antibiotic-associated diarrhea, which is why many of my patients that are prone to this, and even ones who aren't, I recommend consuming probiotic-rich foods while taking antibiotics like yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, that kind of stuff. I have an energy drink every time I go to the gym, but my gym friends say it causes cancer. Is that true? First, I have to put it right into the open. Life causes cancer. If you live long enough, you'll develop some form of cancer. Overconsumption of energy drinks is a blight on humanity, is harming our sleep, creating health issues, is impacting our mental health. Can I say that it's doing that to you? I cannot. But I actually have seen a story that I believe Daily Mail have really blown out of proportion, saying that this ingredient, taurine, that you see in some of the popular energy drinks, causes turbocharged cancer because a study in Nature was looking at how the ingredient behaved in mice who had a specific type of blood cancer. And that's not what happened. It found that an already aggressive cancer became slightly more aggressive as this taurine was given, but that doesn't mean that's what's gonna happen to you and I as humans. The answer is, if you have an energy drink every now and then, it's probably not the end of the world as long as you're young and healthy, but know that it can contribute to some heart arrhythmias. They can create issues with your mental health, again, your sleep. And then if you're messing with your sleep, you impact all sorts of other avenues within your life, including your cardiovascular health, your neurological health, etc. And I was actually looking into people using financial aid for sugary beverages. Nebraska was one that was trying to ban sugary sodas and energy drinks from the benefits that come for the financial aid. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think if you're gonna be giving people money, subsidizing their livelihood, you should give them healthy food. If someone is receiving SNAP benefits, they're using those SNAP benefits to buy these unhealthy foods. They then get sick. They could potentially get so sick that they need dialysis and they end up getting federal benefits. You're really digging a hole for our healthcare system that we can't get out of. So if we can instead funnel those funds to healthier foods, that's a much better play for everyone involved. In fact, these
I just want to say real quick, this is something I actually know a little bit about. I kind of agree with his take there in that if you're on SNAP benefits and the only food that's available to you is like sugary sodas and really bad food, like high in carbs and very low in actual nutrients, then yeah, sure. I think we should start to lower the unhealthy foods and increase the incentive to, purchase the healthy foods. From what I read and from what I saw from those SNAP cuts that weren't just in Nebraska, by the way, they were in several different states. They were given waivers so that they don't have to follow federal regulations for certain types of food that are required to be included in SNAP. And one of those was that they would do things for sugary drinks, but also non-sugary drinks as well, and certain juices that had less than 50% juice. And the thing is, they weren't disincentivizing them. They weren't making it harder to get those things. They were cutting them out completely. And I think that's too harsh. That's too ridiculous, right? Like, how often do we find ourselves just indulging ourselves over something little? Like, you've had a rough day and the only thing that's going to help get you out of bed in the morning and make you feel like you can take on your day is that Starbucks. And I know everybody complains about like, oh, it's so expensive, you're wasting your money. And this is why, nobody can afford a house, is because they're spending it all on avocado toast and coffee. Think about it realistically for the real average person on a daily basis. How much do you actually overindulge? And how much of a part of it, of your life is it actually? So I think it's an overreaction with these sodas because I don't think most everybody on these SNAP programs is just going out and buying sodas and just going out and buying unhealthy food. And if they are, I don't think the way to eliminate that is to just completely cut them off and say, you can't have cookies anymore, you can't have soda. Instead, there should be proportions involved, or maybe even just certain requirements of you have to buy this type of food with it. And if you don't, you're going to lose your SNAP benefits. And even then, I feel like that might even be a little too far. Like, this is America, the land of the free, right? Like, even when you're on benefits, shouldn't you be allowed to eat yourself to death, right? Like if you want to eat unhealthy foods, to choose whatever you want as long as it's available. If we really have a problem with what we as American citizens eat, we should change the culture. We should change the types of foods that are available, rather than just simply stating you poor people can't have sugary sodas anymore. I think that's too far. I think that's dumb and doesn't actually help solve anything. It's posturing.
Stories give me a good opportunity to talk to you about Ground News, an app and website that gathers related articles from around the world in one place. This information can
Ground News, never heard of them.
spread. Click the link below to subscribe and get 40% off the same unlimited Vantage plan that I actually use. All right, let's get back to your questions. When we breathe, does some of that air go in and out of our stomach? How does the throat know which way to send air or food or water? The miracle that is the epiglottis that sits right on our little throat hole inside and allows us to breathe and air to go into our trachea and not into our esophagus. That being said, sometimes when you swallow, you also swallow air. And that's why if you're ever to get an x-ray, on an x-ray, air is seen as dark or black. That dark spot is air in your stomach because there is air in your GI tract from every time you swallow, because you can't not swallow air. The air's everywhere. Does Rib have a go-to toy? Oh, look at this guy. Yeah, he does. Me. Am I your go-to toy? Yeah, I'm your go-to toy. How big did he get? He used to be so small. I used to just hold him in my little hands.
That's still
Look
a
at that
really
smile.
big puppy.
Look at that. I just put up a video kissing him and then going like this. And people said I was causing him anxiety. Rib, do I cause you anxiety?
The eyes, Chico, they never lie.
I have a pillow that I think someone made me or someone sent me that is of me. And he doesn't really tear anything up at home.
this a little
Maybe
bit.
feel about online medical tests. I think I had ADHD. I took some online tests. Is that enough to know, or should I go see a regular doctor? I think it's not enough.
Go
to
see a
just
regular doctor.
A regular doctor and potentially a psychiatrist is the best move there. My hair started graying in my 20s. Why does our hair eventually lose color? Pigment, bruh. The pigment says deuces, just like mine is right now. In fact, in that video where I was kissing Rib, my hair looks really gray. But I think that the iPhone camera plays tricks on us sometimes. Is it dangerous to brush your teeth more than twice a day? Dangerous? No. Is it recommended by dental organizations that are smarter than me? Also no. I feel like your enamel will take a beating if you brush your teeth 10 times a day. BMO YouTube, how legit are sleep scores? Should I be tracking how well I sleep every night? BMO, here's how I think about it. Part of what it means to be healthy is trying to understand your body. So if you're going to sleep and you're having good sleep hygiene and you're waking up refreshed, what do you need a sleep tracker to tell you whether or not you're getting good sleep? The device is either gonna tell you what you already knew, or it could potentially tell you something wrong that will impact how you feel. Because if you had a good night's sleep and you woke up feeling well rested, but then I give you false results off your watch and tell you you actually had a terrible night's sleep, your performance will drop. That's been studied. And there's a whole set of anxieties that come around this sleep tracking called orthosomnia that has been described in medical literature. So don't get anxious about it. I've heard sleeping on a hardwood floor is actually good for your spine.
Just real quick, find it really interesting about those sleep metrics. I have a friend who uses that quite a bit. Hey, sorry, cat's biting cables. I have a friend who uses those sleep metrics and uses a lot of different metrics in their life. And this is just the way that they function. This is definitely not the way that every average normal human person functions. But the interesting thing about it is that, yeah, on every night they wear their Apple Watch or whatever it is, and it keeps track of their sleep, and it tells them the next day whether they had a good night's sleep or not. And I am completely not that way. It is all about feeling for me, and I don't care to keep track of those metrics because I know whether I had a good night's sleep or not. The interesting thing with this friend is, regardless of how they felt about their sleep, what they care about is the numbers, right? Is the reporting. So even if they know that they feel they had a good night's sleep, if as soon as they look at those sleep numbers and it tells them like, oh no, you didn't have a good night's sleep, that's their reality. The truth for them is what the numbers said and not what their feelings say. They trust the numbers so much more than their gut feelings. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I don't know that one way is necessarily better than the other. I just found it super interesting that one might wake up in the morning and think like, oh man, what a good sleep. That felt so great. That's so nice. And then check your app later and it tells you had a terrible sleep. Like, oh, actually, I had a bad night's sleep. I remember now it was terrible. And just funny how your perspective can change like that. And it's not just the one direction. I think people will also go the other direction, maybe not so much with sleep and things, but with other things in reality where, you know, they might get numbers behind something that says, oh yeah, no, this was really good. You had a good night's sleep, whatever. But they'll think to themselves, like, I feel like I know I did not have a good night's sleep. I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it in my gut. I don't care what the numbers say. Like, this is lying to me. And again, I don't think that necessarily one is better than the other. I think both should be employed, but it is funny how some people will rely more heavily on one or the other.
Fine, is this true? I would not recommend it. If you want to get some relief for back pain, getting a firm supportive mattress that still has a soft surface is ideal so that it is able to cradle the surfaces but still support your spine so that you're not completely uneven. Part of a good sleep posture is making sure you have the correct pillow for your preferred sleeping position. For example, if you like to sleep on your side, you're gonna need a little bit more support. If you sleep on your back, you might want a thinner pillow. But no, I don't recommend on hardwood floor sleeping. I think there are better options. Why is my ring finger so janky? Why is it worse than every other finger? Maybe you don't want to get married. Maybe it's just your finger's instinct to say, YOLO, I'ma roll solo. My suspicion is you either overused it or you've had some sort of injury. For example, I have some janky fingers, and a lot of it comes from jamming my fingers playing basketball or being a goalkeeper when I was in high school playing soccer. And the reason why I'm thinking injury and trauma versus an autoimmune joint disease issue is because it's only present in one finger. So if it's something systemic, I would expect it to be on both sides. But if you just have one finger impacted, it's likely due to some kind of overuse, some kind of trauma. Not with 100% certainty, but that's where my mind goes. My biggest concern with 23andMe is that someone's DNA can end up in the wrong hands. What if government starts cloning people? How are you gonna prove that you're the real you against your clone? We need to make a movie. I'm sure that there is a movie made about this, but I feel like we need to work in 23andMe in it, but we should call it like 46andYou, just so that we don't get sued, because I feel like the company that bought all the records that came with 23andMe is probably trying to maximize that financial investment in our medical records and in the lawsuits that it can trigger against people. My dad has a really dark neck.
I think that's an interesting question, one that we probably don't have to face today, but might have to eventually. We are so far away from cloning humans that answering the question of, like, what if the government starts cloning us and we can't distinguish between me and my clone? We are so far away from that that I don't think that answering that question right now matters, but eventually it might. And if it does, I don't think it's going to be because of 23andMe giving access of you know, our DNA to various agencies that would want to use it. At the very least, government officials, maybe corporations, because you could see them like your health information, your private genetic sequence being more protected from other, like, corporations entities rather than the government. I could see them having a higher standard there. But I think in this hypothetical future, if it were the case that, oh, this guy, we really want to clone him, but he never gave his DNA over to 23andMe, and now we just, like, we're just not going to be able to clone him. Like, that was the only way to do it. That's not the only way to do it. For anybody who did take did 23andMe, you spit into a vial and you send it to them, and they run your genetic sequence through a polymerase chain reaction off of that. And, like, that's all it takes, right? All they would need is, like, some of your saliva or some of your hair. So any organization out there, whether it's corporate or governmental, even today, if they wanted your genetic sequence, all they would have to do is get a hold of, your hair or your saliva or a skin sample or something like that, like very minimal amounts of you, and then run it through a lab PCR where they can proliferate it and then run your genetic sequence. Like, the limiting factor would not be the fact that it exists on 23andMe. The limiting factor would be us as a society stepping up and saying, hey, you do not have a right to clone me genetically and to make a copy of me. I exist as an individual, and I don't want you to be able to do that. And we would have to set that up through a legislative route rather than protecting it through 23andMe, because that's not going to be the mitigating factor. It's just not.
and your video got me to check with a doctor, and it was very serious. Thank you, Dr. Mike, for this. Without this video, it might have been too late. That's amazing, Janine. Thank you for sharing that with me. What you're probably describing is acanthosis nigricans, which is a darkening of skin folds that can happen with someone who has adrenal issues or perhaps insulin issues related to a form of diabetes. In general, for your skin, if you see new moles pop up that look atypical and weird, definitely get them checked out. Or dark lines on the fingernail, also very important. Is it possible for taste buds to change over time so you end up liking something later in life that you didn't when you were younger? Yeah, they do change. You do have a capacity to enjoy things that were once
Interestingly, that's the same thing with allergies too. You can develop allergies later in life, or you can get rid of them. Like that, just as your taste buds will change, so might your allergies.
perhaps too bitter for you. Do I have a medical reason as to why they change? No, I don't. There's definitely a change that does occur. Hey doc, do you have any tips for dealing with Osgood-Schlatter's? I've dealt with Osgood-Schlatter's. Usually activity modification, icing, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories will do the trick. Physical therapy, obviously, as well. But for me, KT tape. I put it on, I left it on for several days. I swear to God, I never had a problem afterwards. How often should I wash my bath towel? I think after every bath or two, after every shower or two is a reasonable move here. The problem with bath towels is moisture builds up. Sometimes they're hung in a way where part of it is not getting good aeration. That's gonna create fungal growth. You don't wanna be rubbing fungus on your freshly clean skin, especially if you're somebody that's prone to skin irritation, which so many of us are. What's your process?
I would also say the answer to that also kind of depends on how you dry your clothes as well. If you're using like a high efficiency, low temperature tumble dryer, like a lot of people in the US are using, I think it's more important to wash your towels after every single use, because water in towels is a breeding ground for microorganisms, right? And that's the problem that you would face after every shower. Like, yeah, sure, maybe you're clean, but you are making the towel wet and it can wick microorganisms out of the air, or maybe you just happen to have some left on your body, or maybe the towel touched something that you didn't realize. Either way, it's now a breeding ground for those microorganisms. If you if you have that low temperature tumble dryer, it's not going to necessarily kill off those microorganisms from previous washes. The thing that's going to kill them off is your, well, maybe not necessarily your detergents, but hopefully your what's the other one that you need to put in the wash? There's a detergent, and then there's not an antimicrobial. What's it called? A disinfectant, right? That would be what clean, or the high temperature in the water. Now, if you dry your towels on a drying rack outside in the sun, the UV radiation is usually enough to kill off whatever microorganisms exist, so that even if you do happen to leave it wet for a little bit and reuse it with the next wash, the next shower or whatever, the likelihood of it having microorganisms proliferated is substantially reduced because of the fact that it was treated with UV radiation. But otherwise, your low temperature tumble dryer doesn't necessarily do the same thing. So like in my case, where that's what I have, I prefer to wash every single time. And I just don't like the way my towels smell when I don't wash them after every use. They do start to get kind of musty, I think. Like I don't like the smell.
For deciding who you invite on your podcast. It's topical based on what's happening in the world today. It's conversations that I genuinely enjoy and want to have. I think if there's a public health need, like currently we're looking for a really good expert to talk about headaches, I'm open to suggestions. If there's someone you want to see on the pod, drop it down below in the comments. Who is Sam? Dr. Mike's friend, his roommate, boyfriend, fiance, husband, family member. I'd like to know. Sam is the managing editor of the Dr. Mike channel. He is the one that has gathered these questions. So if you want to bribe him, please email him. His email is samdonaldbowers@gmail.com.
Yeah, on that spectrum, which one is it?
All of the above. Whatever I need that day.
That's right.
How accurate do you think the 911 show is? I know it isn't medically based, but there's some medical stuff in it. Okay, there's medical stuff in it, as in a shark appears on a highway, bites a dude's arm, leg off, and then they have to rescue the person. Instead of me telling you, why don't you watch my reaction? Click here to check it out. And as always,
Oh, silly. Okay. I need a bit of a break. My neck's starting to get a bit tight. Need to refill my drink, so I'm going to end the stream here for a little bit, and then I might come back later and play some Factorio. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Bye.